Okay. Gadol Torah shemevi refuah lekol basar. Great is Torah because it brings healing to all flesh. Who needs refuah?
Baruch Benjamin ben Rechablima, Yehudis Golda Bas Elisa Hana, Haim Yaakov Zev ben Sarah, Yosef Yitzhak ben Lior, and Shoshana Bas Hana.
Refuah shlema b'koreh.
Amen. Amen. Thank you.
Devor Rachel bat Miriam Chava, Rivka bat Sally Sela, Zlata bat Sarah Liba, Binyamin Ber ben Hana. Did I say Devor Rachel bat Miriam Chava? Probably for the first one. And Legela bat Sima, Avram Meir Pinchas ben Chayanessa.
Refuah shlema b'koreh.
Amen.
Esther Fega Bas Chaya Rachel.
Refuah shlema b'koreh. Rav Yitzhak Feivish ben Braina Malta. So how the refuah shlema.
Amen.
Hayom Yom 25. Shabbos Mevorchim. Shabbos Mevorchim. Oh, yeah. Okay. My father writes, Rabbi Rashav writes in one of his letters, I heard in the name of our holy fathers, the Rebbe, the Rebbeim, that also meaning in addition to a man, when a daughter is born, we say, the Torah l'chuppah ulamasim toivim. We say Torah, even though it's generally the avodah of men to be sitting in the Beis HaMikdash and steiging away. We also say Torah for our women. Why? This is based on the statement of our sages. Sages said, he says in Gemara Brachos, how do women earn merit? By seeing to it that their children go to study Torah, that their husbands go to study Torah, and by awaiting their husband's return. So I look at this, and this is just my viewpoint on it. I think there's some emes in it. We know the statement, Eshes Chayil Ateres Baila. A woman of strength is a crown to her husband. In other words, it's the woman's responsibility to influence from the level of Kesser, crown, influence, Kitor, that her husband should arouse, in other words, Kesser, the Torah, the crown is the will, right? Will. To help the husband arouse his will to fulfill his mitzvahs of learning Torah. Now, of course, the woman has to learn Torah, halachas that pertain to him, to her, just as a man does. But she has an additional responsibility to make sure that she is part of the crown, meaning arousing the will of her husband to steig, to get deeply into it. So I take it. Okay. Lessons in Tanya. Continuing our topic of chelek. What's a chelek? A part. Chelek elakah, right? Our neshama is a chelek elakah. Yaakov, Kevel, a rope is his inheritance, right? He has a descending capability of bringing from above to below, and as things come from above to below, they get differentiated, etc. All the multiplicity, and this is beginning, we're in the middle on page 130 in Lessons in Tanya, and Thursdays in Chayenu is on page 95. Okay, lesson in Likutei Moharan, we are here. Yes, we are here. Bottom of page 222. 3 line, 1, 2, 3, fourth line up from the bottom. Okay, so just to remember our Divrei HaMaskil, the words with which this letter begins. Ashreinu matev chelkeinu. How happy is our chelek, and plural, our portions. And that's what we've been explaining, portions. Portions, the realm of multiplicity, versus allness, the realm of essence. And we've been talking about that for the last couple of days. And that's the notion of bringing down the Torah step by step into this world. And we're beginning here. Okay, 3 lines up from the bottom. V'hinei, the Gemara in Baba Basra, Baba Metzia, says the following interesting question. Shufreha de Yaakov, literally the beauty. Shifra, remember Shifra and Pua? Shifra, a Russian, she would beautify all the newborn that came out. She was a what do you call it? A midwife, thank you. And she's cleaned up and made the babies beautiful when they came out. Shofreha, so the beauty of Yaakov, Shofreha de Yaakov, this is Yaakov Avinu, Ma'en Shofreha de Adam Arishon, is similar to the beauty of Adam Arishon. In what respect? That Yaakov shetiken chet Adam Harishon. Yaakov rectified the sin of Adam Harishon. So this needs a little bit of explanation. Remember, Adam Harishon was born into a world which, from one point of view, was meant to be a world full of godliness and no sitra achra. And I say from one perspective, because the other perspective is that the bringing into reality or bringing into consciousness the sitra achra is also part of God's plan. And that's what he did. He took the allness, the light which went from one end of the world to the other, right? And through his sin, that light became hidden and a darkness fell upon the world. Yaakov Avinu, in his generation, brought back the light that was from Adam Rishon. He actually begins with Avram Avinu, but Yaakov was the one who particularly stepped in to rectify Bira, Mevara, to rectify the darkness of the big archetype of Klippa in his generation, which was his brother Esav. And his goal was, and he worked to rectify. First, he went to Lavan, and he rectified Lavan. He took all the sheep that were meant to be taken out of the hands of the Sitra Achra of Lavan. And he also attempted the same with his brother Esav, thinking that this could be, and from his consciousness, he felt it was time for the complete rectification, the Geula. So he's all about birurim, rectification, and that's rectifying something that was caused initially by Adam Harishon. So that's the notion of Shifrecha or Adam Harishon is like, Yaakov is something like the beautification that existed at the time of Adam Harishon before the sin. Because he was Masakin Chet Adam Harishon. He fixed, rectified the sin of Adam Harishon. V'hoyas ha-nishmosek back inside. V'hoyas ha-nishmosek gam came kalula mikol ha-nishomis sheb'Yisrael. And his soul, like Adam Harishon's soul, which we mentioned yesterday, contained all the souls of all the Jewish people. And that's one of the reasons why his name becomes Yisrael. Yaakov hu Yisrael. And these two things are related together in Chassidus. Yaakov is broken up into Chassidus, Yud Ekev. He brings the Yud, which is the point of infinity of God, the pintala, the point, down into the heel, which is the physical world. He does that. And that ultimately is the berurim of redemption, to take the darkness of this world and to but to bring illumination, bring out the illuminating quality of the Yud in the darkness. And that is a function of Avodas Yisrael, of all the avoid of the Jewish people, and therefore his name becomes changed to Yisrael when he fights with the angel of Esav. So his name is Yisrael, right? So that's the idea of him including all the neshamas of the Jewish people, bringing all the inclusion of everything into, and the awareness of the inclusion of everything into everything. And he does that from one level to another. He becomes a chariot, and remember, Yisrael, we are Am Yisrael. We have this quality. That's why he's talking about it here, not just a story. And what we have is the ability to become like him, a merkava l'Torah shelamayla, a chariot to the Torah which comes from above, to embody God's will and to ride it forward, and in that way take away destroy all the negativity, which was his avoidance, which was the state of things that existed in the first place, where there was no negativity whatsoever. Shenikra b'shem Adam. And this notion of Torah, coming from above to below, the Torah itself is called Adam. It's based on a pasuk. Adam kiyamos. Person, when an Adam dies in a tent, then it goes on with the laws of ritual purity for a mace. And Adam, al demus hakise demus kamara Adam. Yehezkel's vision on the appearance of the throne. Yehezkel saw the appearance of an Adam. Adam is also Aleph Dam, bringing the Alufa Shel Olam. That's God himself, the one who's called the Alufa Shel Olam Aleph, the master, the chief of everything, into the blood, which is the substrate of all physicality, the blood flow. So Torah has that quality, and therefore the Torah is called Odom. Mishikazav, as is written, Bezois Nefonim b'Yisrael. It says this, it will be in front of Yisrael. This is a pasuk in Ruth, which has to do in the simple meaning with business transactions. This is what you have to put in front of people so that they're behaving in the way they should behave. But we darshan this penimiously. But Zois, right? Zois HaTorah. Right? This is the Torah. We say when the Torah comes out, Zois HaTorah. Zois is lifnim, is the penimius. The Torah is the penimius of all the Jewish people. That's what's embedded in our penimius, Torah, or the light of Torah. Ein Zois Torah, as he says, this is not him saying, this is actually the Chazal. Ein Zois Torah. There is no Zois, this, except for Torah. And all of this that we've been speaking about, all these points and characteristics of Torah, the purpose of Torah, all of this was enclosed B'nishmas Yisrael Saba, in the soul of the one who's called the grandfather Yisrael. This is Yaakov Avinu, our patriarch. HaKalula Mekol Neshamas, which, as we said earlier, Yaakov, like Adam Arishon, it was an inclusion or an inter-inclusion of all the neshamas. He contained all the neshamas of all the Jewish people. And this is what it means, V'yikrado Kel Elokei Yisrael, that he's called to him God, and he's going to explain right now. Kel is Lashon Hamshachas. Kel, that word for God, refers to godliness, as godliness is drawn down through and by the Jewish people, Israel. Kel Lashon Hamshacha. Kel is a language of drawing down of what? Of a ha'ora, of a ray of light. Me'or Ein Sof, from the source of all light, which is the Ein Sof Baruch Hu, the light from the light which is infinite, or Ein Sof Baruch Hu, the light which is infinite. May he be blessed. Me'ahelim, and to bring that light, and this is we're Yisrael, right? He contains that. He's the progenitor. He's the grandfather of us all, Yisrael Saba. He passes that down through his spiritual DNA, so to speak. And our avoida is all, we inherit that avoida, right? And that avoida is to bring out the Or Ein Sof, Me'ahelim Elagila, from the concealment to revelation. Starting, of course, within ourselves, to illuminate our own souls. Mishikazav, his beloved Melech, writes in Tillim, Kale Havaya Loyalon. Kale, there's that word kale. meaning, as he said, Kamshach, which is the name of God, Kel, and when it refers to godliness, as godliness comes down and invests itself in throughout and down into the lower worlds, and God and David HaMelech prays that and yearns and praying that Hamshacha should illuminate us. The Acharov Kol Yisrael, and after that, meaning in pursuit of that, and in dedication to that, and realizing those realizations in ourselves and in the world, Kol Yisrael is everybody who's of upright heart, ha'oskim b'Torah u'mitzvahs, and who occupies themselves in Torah and mitzvahs, and in doing so, Meir or Hashem Ein Sof Baruch Hu B'Bechinas Gili B'Nishmasam, and in doing so, there radiates the light of Hashem, the light of the Infinite One, blessed be He, in a category, in a level of revelation in our souls, in the Shmasam, in our souls. Zman Gilui Zeh B'Yosef Ha'es, and the time which is where this revelation is strongest, Yosef Ha'es, of strong power, Yoser in the most, when the aura, the radiation, the illumination is manifest in our brain and in our hearts, Ubeshas Tefillah is in the time of davening. It is written in another place. And that's today's. Comments? Questions?
Can you please explain how the Torah is the Adam or the Dam, the blood? How can you explain that deeper, or if it has?
It's pretty simple. Torah is the lifeblood of everything, because he looks in the Torah and creates everything, and so blood is the image of life force. Right? That's it. And so what is the life force? The enlivening power of everything is the Torah. And so it's called Aleph Dam. It's the Aleph, it's the Alufa Shel Olam, which penetrates the blood, which is the life force of everything. Zois, and it's just built on Zois Torah's Adam. This Torah is an Adam, is an Aleph Dam, is the life force of the Alufa Shel Olam penetrating everything.
Can you parallel it with our Dam, our life force?
Sure. That's why it's called blood. Blood is the residence, is where the life force resides. Right? The physicalization of the spiritual happens in the blood. It happens really in the bone marrow, and which is another topic in itself. Atzomas, right? Why are bones are called atzmos? Right? Atzomas, the same word as essence. Because the essence of our being is, and our being, meaning our ability to be in a state of physicality and aliveness, is manufactured in the bone marrow. And the bone marrow then becomes influential in terms of and then the blood becomes influential in terms of circulating all that stuff, all that life force to all the parts of the body. So bone and blood are facts, and they're both, metaphors for essence and then circulation from essence of the life force.
If you would break it down further into DNA, what would that be?
I don't know enough about DNA to tell you that. But you got the point? Yeah?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. That's an interesting thing, right? Why bones are called atzomas, and blood, dam, life. Adam hu hanefesh, right? The blood is the living soul. It's the place where the living soul gives its energy into physicality. Okay, many other questions on what we've been learning, what we learned today?
It's
Okay.
also
Just a comment. I mean, the Chumash
Sure,
of
sure,
this
sure.
week talks about, the Chumash of this week talks about don't eat the blood because that's where the nefesh is.
That's where the nefesh is. Yes.
Just it's right in from Chumash.
Good point. Good point. Anybody else before we all jump in with our ubechains? Therefore,
I heard recently somebody explained that Adam Harishon had the neshamas of all Israel included in him.
yes.
And then the next person who had that was Yaakov Avinu. And I guess the question was Yisrael, or Yisrael as we learned today. Did it pass down or did it just remain up in heaven and never come back down until he was born?
That's a good question. Let me think about that if I have learned anything about that. I mean, for instance, it's a question that, well, I say it's a good question. Number one, because I can't answer it immediately. But number two, we learned that the 2,000 years of Birurim began with Avram Avinu. So Avram Avinu, had children. And why we're jumping to Yaakov, I really can't answer from that point of view of transmission of the genes or the spiritual genes. But we can answer it as he answers it here. Well, he doesn't answer it, as I explained it here. When we look at the avoda of Yaakov Avinu. Avram ish chesed, right? He brings chesed out. What mida is Yaakov's? Tiferes, right? So that's the mida of inter-inclusion. That's the idea of gathering all the sparks together. And he embodies that. Now, he certainly, the power that he has from that certainly comes, through the spiritual evolution from Adam, goes through other people, Chanoich. You could ask questions even about that. There's a whole, tradition of passing the sparks of the Nefesh Elokis down through generations. Then you have, as we mentioned yesterday, the generations before the flood, and who went crazy. And so those holy sparks fragmented into what became the non-Jewish nations. But there's a transmission down to Noach, and Noach has Shem, right? And Ever, and Avram Avinu goes and learns that so there is a direct transmission, that's for sure. The only thing I can say, having thought about this now, as you asked, is that the next big center of Birurim is embodied in Yaakov, to rectify the world. He's the one who sets himself out to say an end to this klippa. I'm going to gather in Yaakov Avinu. You may know the Memorial Mesichas about what that was all about. He thought that Esav was ready. Esav is huge. Esav is a huge power, as klippa is a huge power. And when you rectify that huge power becomes an explosion of Kedusha. And the one whose set upon himself, or let's say was given, the mission for that was Yaakov Avinu. So that's all I can say to you. That certainly there's a transmission of all of this capability from Adam Harishon down through Hanoich, and then down through Noach, etc., etc. But this crystallization, that it should say, that sort of that Yaakov Avinu said that Igia Zaman Golasika, the time of redemption is now. I'm going to make it happen. It's now. That avoida and that feeling is crystallized in Yaakov. And that's about all I can say about that.
It's kind of similar to Yosef being the continuation of Yaakov and not the other Shvatim, even though you needed the other Shvatim, like maybe Chesed, Gevu, like a Netzach, Hod, whatever. But Yosef gathered everything you said.
That's exactly right. Yosef, that's his name, Yosef, to gather everything together. And Yaakov was historically, and by no accident, the one who wrestled with the angel of darkness, and won. He won, and therefore Yashakel, he becomes the strong one of God, which we learned today what Kale is, right? The Hamshacha, the drawing down of the aura from the Or Ein Sof. He became Yashu. He became the upright and strong one to do it. So there was a moment there. That was a moment when Geula could have happened, but it wasn't the time. And he embodies that more than Avram Avinu does or anybody before. So maybe I did answer the question. Did I answer the question?
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Ubechein. Well, guys, we embody this, right? We all inherited the spiritual DNA of Yaakov Avinu. So here we are.
We have the power. We have the power to do what Yaakov wanted to do.
Exactly. And let's set out to do it.
Do it.
Right?
Now that we're alive and we have blood running through our bones.
Bones and sinews and blood vessels. Tut als, the Rebbe said, right? And continues to say in all of his writings. We have it all, als. We have everything now. Tut als. Do everything with it. Okay.
Amen. Thank
Tomorrow.
you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.